just to let you know, I did see the body. It's floating down the river.
We have breaking news on the show.
That's not true. He's lying.
Oh my God, this is my first story, and it didn't even air.
Let's party. There's always a party. Let's go, Paulie. Pump it up the crowd.
Pump it up.
There's no
Partiers.
crowd. There's
How we
no
doing?
crowd out there.
There's always a crowd here.
There is a crowd. Not here, but out there.
Out there, listen to us every week. We appreciate you partiers coming back every week. But this week, we got a special guest in the house.
In studio, special guest. Let's bring him out. Let's waste no more time. We have news reporter Brendan Straub. Welcome to the show, my guy. I love it. The double
Let's
wave.
go.
Let's get the guest on. I'm excited.
He had the double wave he brought in.
I'm excited. He's a news
What's up?
reporter, so the cameras are nothing new to you. Does that still affect your nerves or no?
No.
Well, I want you to be nervous. But
Not
what
really.
affects my nerves is this show sometimes, so I'm going to drink Guinness, because you know what? I'm a Guinness guy. Like I said last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm a Guinness guy.
Yeah, Guinness. I think. It's just part of the nature now.
Oh, I just shot myself in the face.
I got plenty of Guinness on the show. We can keep doing this week over week. Hopefully, you guys have checked out Guinness. We told you it's a vibe. Let us know if you've been drinking it or not. And Brendan, we got some drinks for you, so you can be drinking as well. And we talk about it. If you are in a safe space right now and not on the road driving, crack a beer with us. Join us for a good time.
Yeah, well, Brendan, he's a big fan of the show. And you mentioned that you listen to us while you're driving, so you can't really crack a beer and join us with a beer while you're driving.
No, I don't think that's a good to
No,
call my boss and tell him that I need to stop for an hour to listen to the podcast
Just be
and
like,
then
yo,
get
let's
going.
party, guys. Told me to pull over, be safe, obviously. And that's what you had to do. So
All right, so
hopefully
Brendan-
you're drinking.
We're excited to have you on Life's a Party, another in-studio guest. Fan of the show, so we appreciate you for that.
Very much so.
Tell me about the interaction with you and Paul and how this came about. How did we get you on that couch?
Weird. So I don't know if people remember, maybe, I don't know, a year and a half ago, they gave a shout out to this anonymous super fan, I think as Paul coined it.
Yep.
And that was actually me. I messaged Paul on Instagram and just said, hey, you guys are doing really good. I just listened to you guys like for 6 hours straight.
That's impressive. To
Six
listen
episodes.
to us blabber for 6 hours.
I was coming home from, I went to school at Towson University in Maryland. And I was driving home from Maryland. I had my graduation almost a year and a half after I actually graduated. COVID.
I was a COVID graduation as well. I feel that.
So I was driving home and I was like, everyone keeps talking about it. My friends like, oh, it's cool. I've seen like promos. I'm like, I never really listened to it before. I was like, oh, I'll throw one on. You listen to one runs into two, into three. And by the time I knew it, I was home and I listened to like 6 in a row.
Got addicted to us, Paul.
Yeah, I remember when he told us that, not gonna lie, I said I wouldn't be able to listen to us for 6 hours.
No.
That's crazy to me, but we appreciate you. And I bet you hopefully there's more people like you out there. And we love all the partiers. It's pretty cool. And now we got you on the show.
Yeah, and you're a news reporter, which always fascinates me because I went to school for public relations. I minored in journalism. And I really don't think that news reporters actually get the credit that they deserve. So let's start from the beginning and your path into becoming a news reporter, and we'll get to what you're doing now, where you're at now. But what was that? Where did that itch come from? Were you? We went to the same high school, not
Correct.
the same grade.
Correct.
But our school started a radio, television class. Was that where you started to be like, you know what, this is something that I would like to do for the rest of my life?
I think so. My parents always joked around and said I always was a camera kid growing up. I always loved to be in front of the camera, doing stuff. And then in high school, I started doing sports games with the TV production that we have at our school. And
Call
then
any of my games?
No, you were usually on the bench. But
That's okay. That's not true. He's lying.
What's amazing?
That's the end of the show today. Brendan, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. I was not on the bench.
What's amazing is I was about to say the joke and he beat me to it. So that's great.
We're not going to have this double team again, all right? But go ahead.
So I started taking TV and radio classes as well. I mean, I think both of you can kind of say we were really privileged as high schoolers to have a TV station and a radio station in our high school. I mean,
I
not a
think
lot
we
of
took
kids.
it for granted.
No, definitely. But I think I got my feet wet there. I did the morning news, shout out those pizza dunkers, lunch menu.
news.
The lunch menu.
I never did the morning. You did the morning news, Paul.
I did the morning news in middle school, and I think I did the morning news once or twice in high school. I just wasn't in the class. Like I wanted to do it, but I was like, I did other things. I was a theater kid.
Well, I sucked at reading, so I wasn't really confident going up
The
there. Being like,
teleprompter?
what's for lunch? And then they'll like hear me go and be like, what the fuck did Ryan say was for lunch? It's like I wasn't the guy for that role. Like
No.
that was not it for me.
Yeah, so before, when I first started in high school, we had to go in before school and do it. So I would have to get to school 45 minutes early. Then we already were getting, I was getting there like 6:30 in the morning to do the news.
That's why I realized. So I did theater in the morning. My theater was like, what was it? It was like 7 to 7:45. And I think, and then TV moved to doing it prior. So it was like you guys got in at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Correct. And there was like our skeleton crew. There only used to be like 3 or 4 of us when we first started really getting it off the ground. And then now they do it in the middle of the day during access or whatever period they call it now. And so they have like 15, 20 kids in the class now. So I'm happy to see that it's getting more traction. But I think from that, shout out, Dude K, shout out.
Dude K.
I like that. Ryan knows from baseball, Dude K.
Dude K. Producer Drew loves K.
Yeah, we talk about we always behind the scenes talk about our one of our high school teachers who was, I think all of us, I mean, big reason actually why we found our producer. We can give him a little shout out, but literally how we found our producer Drew was through Mr. K, which was our high school teacher who did TV. And I was like, hey, we need extra help for the show. We're growing.
Yeah.
This is when we built this new set, and Drew's been, a great person for us, and he's been around since this time last year, like almost like August or September. So it's a really cool thing, and Mr. K's great.
Have they asked you to come back? Because like you're one of the ones off the top of my head who has had good success in the news reporting world or the media world. I mean, they've asked you to come back and do something.
I actually went back. It would have been April. Yeah, because I went to. It's funny. I was almost late to opening day because I was at Sterling. For the Phillies. It was opening day for the Phillies, and Mr. K brought me in. I talked to their advanced TV class for the whole block. So 80 minutes of trying to tell kids what I did for a living.
I always think about that. Like if someone were to ask me to be like a guest speaker, like, yeah, I've done like stand up and like coming up with material and stuff, but like 90 minutes of talking and like giving like motivational speech to kids, like I don't think I can do that.
Ryan's like, I did 6 minutes of stand up. 80 would be hard.
I come on the podcast and I can talk and be funny
true.
here, but to get in front of a group where it's like, okay, I'm gonna tell you guys how to succeed. Like that's a difficult thing to do, and I give all props to people like you could do it. So what was that like?
It was fun. I think it's hard to try to encapsulate 2 years of working in one job in a 45. He pretty much gave me like 45, 50 minutes and they asked questions, and a lot of them didn't really have a lot of, so he kind of was asking me stuff. So I think the hardest part was trying to not go off on tangents or like give them crazy nonsense stories to like sway them away from doing the job, because it does have its days, but it truly is. It's a lot of fun.
It's a grind. It's not a glorious job.
No.
So at the same time, you want to be informative and give these kids motivation, but it's like, it's real shit. Like it's not easy. Like it's not easy at all.
I mean, because just to kind of give you the gist, so my technical job title, I'm a multimedia journalist, MMJ for short. So MMJs are the new kind of model of journalist as they come out of college now. Pretty much if you can't be an MMJ, you pretty much aren't gonna be able to find a job.
So what's that? Is that on air?
So it's called one man band. So pretty much I edit, record, do my interviews, write, edit, and everything for air. And there's no other person doing any other section of my piece before it airs. I have to do it all myself.
That's insane. And like that just sounds stressful off the rip. But then like the fact that like you're doing that every single day and you have like deadlines to meet and like shit goes wrong, shit hits the fan. Like, how stressful is your day to day? Like, what take us through your day to day.
So, I guess the reporting day. So, if I'm working a normal, we call them dayside shifts. So, if I'm working a dayside shift, we have morning meetings at 9:30. We all meet in the conference room, and then we kind of go through
like pitch ideas,
or we kind of have like a list usually of like things we're looking to do, maybe things we've already set up. We have like our assignment manager. She's in charge of finding stories or finding ideas, answering phone calls. She's really like the brain of our operation. Like she's the one who finds the things that we do every day.
Like local like calendars, like what's going
on, or somebody calls the station and be like, hey, we have this problem. We think it might be newsworthy. We might have to do some research and check it out, call them back, be like, hey, we'll set this up for 11 o'clock tomorrow. Can a reporter meet you at your house, or whatever the story is?
Mm-hmm.
So then pretty much from there, we do our meeting. Everyone kind of gets their stories for the day. Sometimes you might get, depending on the I guess how big the story is, if it's going to be the lead story for the day or if it's going to be something bigger. A lot of times you'll just have that to do because they don't want you to have other things. But sometimes you might get a couple smaller things to do. Every day is different. I think that's probably my favorite part of the job is no 2 days are ever the same. And so I could come in and think I'm doing one thing, and the next day I'm driving an hour and 45 minutes to go do a story about, a river down the road that maybe there's a bridge over a river that's collapsing, and the town maybe that a town needs help and they're not getting any help from the state. So they want to use the news as an outlet to get that help. So a lot of people will call us with story ideas of things a lot of times in their community events and, or maybe things that are happening that they feel maybe they're not getting enough attention, or they just want to show the people across our area, which is, I live in upstate New York. So Watertown, New York is where I currently work. I live about 30 minutes from the Canadian border, all the way up in New York.
Yeah. Well, we were going to talk about that. Like, I know Ryan, I was looking into working for professional sports teams when I got out of college. And it was kind of that atmosphere where it's so hard to find a job that you say you are, looking for jobs that you have to be able to, you have to be willing to move anywhere. It's like kind of just like take it as it is. Like I had a friend right now who's looking to, she's trying to work in higher education. And I'm like, she just moved to Washington, D.C. And it was like, okay, because that's the only place she could find a job. So like, how was your process of applying? I guess applying for the job, and then I guess landing there.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy how it happened. So again, I'm a COVID kid, as many of us are in the last couple of years. So I never will get to say I could experience the last 7 or 8 weeks of my senior year. We all got sent home and never went back.
From Towson, right? You graduated from Towson?
Correct. Yep, Towson University.
What did you study at Towson?
I was technically at journalism and new media was my major. So, but
Gotcha.
They didn't really have a big broadcast program. It was more of a print program, but they gave me a really good structure to build off of.
So coming out of Towson.
Yeah, so we got sent home for COVID. And we all thought it was going to be a 2-week break and we're going to go back to school.
Yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Leave your laptops.
Yeah. It is the craziest thing.
Fun fact, I packed only 2 weeks of clothes, and I lived off my house in Laurel Springs, 2 weeks of clothes for like 4 months. Because my parents were, God forbid, they were scared, like going, they were always like crazy about going across the state lines. I got stopped or whatever, like they want to risk it. So until I went down to my Maryland apartment and moved out, I lived on like 2 weeks of March, April clothes in the summertime.
Well, buy some goddamn clothes, Brendan. You don't have to just go with the 2 week set.
Stores are closed, bro. Stores are closed. Amazon shut down.
But I was at home and I didn't really, I was applying everywhere. So school ended, the semester ended. I did my last assignment. I submitted my own stuff. This is like mid-May at this point, mid-May 2020. And I just started applying everywhere. I was applying as far as California, Washington, Midwest, anywhere that was hiring an MMJ in a market size. So for those who don't know, a lot of the markets that we go by market size in our industry. So market I'm in right now is currently, we're about 182, which is pretty high up. There's about 210 markets across the country that are rated based on viewership of household. So it's based on like how many people are watching the TV in that specific area. And that's how they measure how well that area, I guess, is doing in terms of viewership. And that's where a lot of the, it comes from viewership. That's where we get our sponsors. That's where we get traction is viewership.
It's like like New York, Boston, like they're the high media
correct. I mean,
areas.
You got like the couple or New York City, LA,
but
Philly.
Out of college, you're new to this. You could say goodbye to those markets.
No,
like, you got to go find like Idaho, these lower end. Because that's just the truth. You got to earn your way up.
Yeah. So I started applying everywhere, and I got a call from the news director in Watertown. So my station call letters are WWNY. So I got a call from my news director that actually is not my news director anymore. But at the time, he called me and said, hey, we're looking for an MMJ. Do you want to do a Zoom interview? And I was like, okay, cool. So we did a Zoom interview. Weirdest first job interview ever.
What was weird about it?
I think because it's my first real job interview, and I'm doing it in my room with a shirt and tie,
no pants.
I'm wearing I'm pretty sure I was wearing like sweatpants. Yeah, because I was the only thing I had like.
No, you didn't have pants on.
You guys have like lights in here. Like I had to set up lights in my room to make it look nice. Like I wanted to give a good first impression. And like at the time, I wasn't like that well known or how to use Zoom, so like I had all of their boxes. Like and there was like 4 or 5 people in the interview, so like I didn't really know who to look at.
Yeah.
Because there's like 4 or 5 people staring at you. They're all saying their names and what they do. And you're trying to retain this all as you're trying to not botch your answers. And
that's even more nerve wracking because what you're interviewing for is like on camera field reporting. It's like, I got to come off as like good at this shit.
I think it's crazy because I also was looking at interviews at the same time. Like I did my first interview. I did them online. It was just a different, like I always try to put myself back in that space of COVID, and I really don't believe it ever happened. Like it's like, I don't remember, like it was kind of like a blackout.
No, it really was, because I go back and think about it, and it's been over 2 years now since we were all stuck at home.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like 2 years ago. Some of it feels like yesterday. Some of it feels like it was a whole 10 years ago.
But props to you, because unlike myself, you got a job during COVID. So I give you props.
So the interview happens.
Yeah, so the interview happens. Literally less than 24 hours later, he calls me back again.
Nice.
He starts giving me like this like weird spiel. It's like the first thing that's like weird with him. So he calls me and he's like, do you have a criminal record? And I'm like,
I gotta check that
First
stuff.
things first.
I'm
Are
like,
you a
no.
convict?
And he goes, how's your driving record? Do you have any? So I'm like,
Well, that's a big thing because like you have to drive everywhere.
yeah. And I know he started asking me
reliable.
like, but there was like other questions that were weird. And then he gets to the end of me and goes, do you want a job in Watertown, New York? And I was like, at first it was my first offer and my first interview. And so like my whole idea was like, I didn't want to like just say yes, but I did. I said yes on the spot because I really didn't know who else would come calling. I mean, I probably applied. If I had like a spreadsheet. I had kept a spreadsheet of every single station that I applied, so I didn't apply twice because I didn't want to look like an idiot applying to the same station twice because I was just applying everywhere. So I probably applied to solid 50 to 60 stations across the country in about a 2-week span.
That's crazy.
That's some shit I would do. Like, oh, you're hired, and then like a day later they get an email. I would like to have a job here, and I'm gonna apply.
So yeah, and then all that happened. So that was probably about right around my birthday, right around mid June 2020. They gave me about 2.5 weeks to move up there. So I had to pretty much go from sitting in my basement on Zoom drinking with my friends to finding an apartment and all that stuff. So I drove up there once. I found an apartment.
Do they have a team that like help you find an apartment?
I mean, they kind of, when they sent out the first email that had just like my normal email on it, they were like, hey, this is our new reporter. He's gonna be coming in a couple weeks. Like, say hi, or like, he's looking for someone. And they did mention like, hey, he's looking for somewhere to live. Like, if you know a place in the area that.
At least that's nice. Yeah.
Because I've heard they've done like different stations will do that.
Yeah,
it's such a quick turnover. Like once, because they're looking for people all the time. So it's like, oh, maybe
so
room with
it's
somebody.
a really quick turnaround. So a lot of times, like they will help you find somewhere to live. They'll give you options, or like they'll put you in touch with a realtor usually and say like, hey, go ask them what's available. They'll show you what the good places are to live and stuff.
That's not. I don't feel like a lot of jobs do that. My job didn't. I mean, I had to move on a dime as well, but I was fortunate enough. I had a great girlfriend who figured everything out. But so what? Just about 2 years now. You've been kind of
over
there?
2 years. Yep.
So have you had any big like oh shit moments, big like mistakes that you think, oh, I could have did that a lot better, or things that just went like catastrophically wrong, but you pulled yourself out of it?
You definitely missed a deadline.
Yes, a couple times. Not gonna lie, I did.
Right now.
The camera definitely died.
My first ever deadline I missed.
Really?
That's good. That's a good start. How'd that happen?
So it's my first story. So where I live up in New York, it's a very big touristy area in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people wouldn't expect that, but we have Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River. They're both big fishing hubs. It's big boat. Pretty much, I joke with people, if you don't have a boat or a snowmobile, then you're kind of out of luck for fun where I live, because it gets to freezing in the winter, and you can pretty much go boating in 75 degrees and sunny with no humidity in the summer. So
that's nice.
So pretty much when I was looking and doing all this stuff, I was doing a story. I think it was about like a boat company. This is during COVID. And they were doing something about like there was a Gananoque, which is in Ontario, Canada. Again, we're so close. A lot of like times they have like boat cruises. You can go and like see all the islands. So I live in the Thousand Islands is what it's called. There's, I believe over 1,800 islands across the entire thing. It's called the Thousand Islands region. That's where like Thousand Islands dressing comes from. Fun fact.
Oh,
nice. I was thinking the salad dressing.
Fun fact, it does come from there. I think there's like myths it does, whatever, who knows. So I do the story. I think the one boat company was upset because you weren't allowed to cross, because of the border rules, you weren't allowed to cross water. So like there's technically like an imaginary line that Border Patrol will look at that technically you're in Canadian waters or American waters. And the story was, it's like, hey, this boat company in the US was upset that the other boat tour was coming into our waters, not getting in trouble for it yet. We're told we can't go over there. So I interviewed the guy who owns the company and like some of the passengers about, the experience, whatever. So I get back and I just like once you first start, I call it reporter clock, and that's kind of what I call it. So I had no reporter clock in the beginning when I first started my job. You need to be back at the station at a certain time of day, or you're never going to get done what you do that day. You have to have reporter clock, or you're never going to get done. So I had no reporter clock. I think I got back at like 3:30. I had a small story for, we do a 5 o'clock show and a 6 o'clock show for our main flagship shows in the nighttime. And then we do night side shows as well. So 5 and 6, usually if you work a day side shift, you have stuff that you have to turn for 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. Usually 5 o'clock's like a preview and 6 o'clock is your big story. And I'm pretty sure my 6 o'clock story, I sent it out, I think at like 6:02 when the show was already on air, and they just floated my story and never aired that day on my first day. And that was pretty deflating you
do all that work,
and then you just don't make deadline, and then it did air later at night. But that whole feeling of like going home and like watching, like, oh my God, this is my first story, and it didn't even air.
Yeah, it's great. Like, I know it's like such, like, I never worked in media, but like I've taken classes and I learned about it. Like, it's such a stressful job. It has to be. And like, you're having to deal with deadlines. It's like, what have you learned? Because you're going on what, year 2? I know you just re-upped your contract.
I'm coming into year 3 now.
So what are like some of the things you like personally have learned where it's like, okay, I have to make sure like this, and that. Like, how do you mentally get past that? Because I'm sure there's some days where it's like, excuse my language, but it's like, fuck this. So it's like, how do you like keep your mental state there? Like, how do you like maintain your schedule and shit like that?
I think for me, like I said, reporter clock was the biggest one. I think once I kind of got that structure of the day down, it becomes easier every day. So once you do it enough, and I also too, like, these are my first time using these bigger, more high-tech cameras that I wasn't ever used to using.
That's true, yeah.
So you're kind of also learning how to do a job, and you're also trying to learn how to use all the equipment at the same time. So now that I have a grasp of the equipment and everything together as one whole unit, as we call MMJs, is what we do every day. I think I've learned, like I said, being quick. Like, my interview questions are a lot more to the point now. Like, I don't beat around the bush or try to get them to say something with a different question. Like, I just ask them straight up, like, tell me what you want to know. Tell me what you want me to know. Or I think you have to like understand with this job that you're telling a story and you're not trying to bore the audience. I usually get only about a minute and a half every night to tell a story. And that could include 5 people. It could include 1 person. It could include a bunch of pictures and audio and video, and like every night's different. So, but you only really have, you always talk about attention spans, people with their phone, screen time. Like, if you don't bring them in within the first 10 seconds of your news story, they're going to probably flip the channel. So the whole point is you're trying to keep them entertained for an entire block of news, which is very hard to do these days because nobody has an attention for the news anymore.
Yeah.
So what's so funny about it is it's cool to see that mentality is literally everywhere in the media, whether it's traditional or like more modern media, like what we currently do with Instagram and TikTok and even YouTube, right? Like, no matter what, because we talk about our show that we're trying to make our intros a little bit better. And like, how do we make that intro better? Because that's really important, because that's got to bring the person in. Or like for our TikToks, the TikTok is only like 60 seconds long, but that first 2 to 3 seconds, because even the content's so short, has to be like engaging, right?
And you can take it back to Vine.
Yeah, like
was that 6 seconds?
It's just the landscape is changing so much. And even news, where you can think like most people don't even want to pay attention because they feel as though it's going to be a downer or depressing, or it's like just boring. They're like, I'd rather have fun.
Well, that's why I don't watch the news. I say it all the time. No offense, but it's like everything. Like, I get where you have to have the negative like headline to like get people to watch. Like, I'm not talking about your news directly, but it's like, I get it, but that's why I don't watch the news.
You got to be captivating, and it's hard, man. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, it is hard.
I also don't think a lot of people really appreciate like the shit that goes on behind the scenes for what you do in creating a story. Like, you're not just getting in front of the camera saying the story and then here's like, footage that someone else adds. Like, can you talk about like the writing aspect of you like constructing a story? Like, you're writing that out before you get on camera, and at the same time with writing it, you're also going out and shooting B-roll, and like you're shooting like hours of B-roll, and then you're rummaging through that to find the right B-roll to use. So can you just talk about the other background things that also go into a news story?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, there's misconceptions of when they see, if we talk about, I guess, a Philadelphia station, they have photogs. So a photographer is just somebody who's on the camera, and the reporter, a lot of times they're union, so they don't get to touch the camera. So reporters are just doing their job. For me, I have to do pretty much 4 people's job, and then when one day, all for one air, and I get a minute and a half to tell the story. So you once you do it enough, I think you pick up on the shots, as we call them shots. So the video shots, you pick up on the shots, not alcohol shots, but video
I
shots.
pick up those shots.
Yeah, that's the shots we pick up.
So
Not a lot, just a
The
couple.
video shots, you've really learned how, once you know how to use your camera, you can do so much and tell a story with maybe something that might not be as entertaining for somebody at home. And I think it's a lot of, like I said, time management. Like I'll keep going back to reporter clock, time management. It's the biggest thing, because if you don't go to wherever you're going for your story, because like there's sometimes our area is very big. So we're a 3-county region. It's called the North Country. Technically our thing is like the North Country's #1 news station. And it's different for us because most areas have multiple stations within that region. So you have a CBS, Fox, ABC, NBC.
Yeah.
We are the only functioning news station in our region. So we are a CBS and Fox affiliates. We have both affiliates.
That's big time.
NBC doesn't really do news. They just do like commercials and promos and stuff. ABC is trying to get off the ground more a little bit with more news. They used to do news and they stopped. Now they're trying to kind of revamp again. But like in terms of like a lot of times you're competing for stories and you're trying to be the first to tell it because you want to be that first in the market to tell it. We don't really have that competition. Our big competition is the newspaper. So we're competing against a newspaper for stories.
At least that's beneficial. That's like a good thing, because even with us, like that's where the attention goes to, right? So if you're trying to pick up, it's important to be the first 10 seconds, like you got to pick attention. But if you have no other people competing for the same story, like that's got to alleviate at least a little bit of stress.
I was thinking about that. I'm seeing Anchorman when I got to go try and get that scene at the end, and they're all fighting for their perfect shot. But at least you don't have to go through that.
Yeah, it's like a plus and a minus. So I think the plus is that, like I said, like you guys said, it's not as stressful finding the stories because a lot of times people do come to us because we are the only really news station. But then it's different because I think when I go to my next market, which will be sometime when I decide to move forward in my career, I'm going to have to get used to that, competing with the same station, different stations for the same story, and trying to tell it differently. And that's something I'll have to learn. But I think for right now, in the beginning of my career, it's really been a blessing.
Is there competition within the newsroom? And like when you guys are at the pitch table, is there like a hierarchy on who gets what story? Like it's almost like a pitching rotation. Is there a 1-2 guy where it's like, okay, we're sending our 2 best guys out here to cover this? Like,
yeah,
is
so
that
it
dynamic?
depends every day. I mean, they do their best to filter it around. I think everyone kind of gets a taste of doing different types of stories. So like, I'm not doing like, if there's the big thing, like maybe there was a bad fire and we're doing a fire follow the next day. Maybe I'll get the fire follow because I've been there a little bit longer and I know what to shoot, but that's not going to be me every time. They try their best to give everyone a chance to do their stories. Yes, they're not going to give someone who's only maybe 3 or 4 months on the job a really great, we need this story to be done a certain way. It needs to get done. It's going to take a lot. We're going to throw someone like me who's been there for 2 years or somebody. We have another girl. Her name is Lexi. Shout out Lexi.
Shout out Lexi. That's good.
Lexi and me both kind of started around the same time, and we're both kind of, she's very talented too. And we both kind of go back and forth sometimes with these bigger stories, but everyone kind of gets their feet wet in the bigger stories sometimes.
So what I'm getting from that is it's you versus Lexi.
No,
who's the best?
A little bit,
no, I mean, we joke around a lot. I mean, there is friendly competition. Like, you know, you might watch somebody's story and text them like, oh, that was a really great shot tonight, or I really liked. So we call them stand up. So you ever watch, a lot of times when you watch the news now, you'll see a reporter. It'll be, Jim Gardner. He's kind of slowing his rollout on ABC, but Jim Gardner he's actually one of my people I watch a lot because he's just a pro's pro.
Shout out Jim Gardner. He's a fan of the show.
He's a pro's pro. So Jim Gardner is huge, and I've watched him for a long time, and I get a lot of inspiration for things with anchoring that I do with him. But if he'll throw it to a reporter, a lot of times it'll be them. They'll do an intro. The story will run. They'll do an outro, outro. For us, sometimes if you're not live, they'll ask you to do a stand-up in the middle. So you might throw a line. A lot of times with stand-ups, it's like my one time that I can be on camera for my piece. Usually it's other interviews or B-roll or me just voicing, kind of doing voiceovers.
That's your time to shine.
That's my one time. So you try to get creative. Like a couple weeks ago,
that's when you wear your best suit and tie, baby.
Yeah, so up by me, the county fairs are a big deal because we're big
county fairs. Let's go.
So yeah, no, seriously, it's a big deal. Like we're at the county fair every day.
I know. I go get some fucking funnel cake every time I see a fair anywhere.
So they're a big deal. And actually, I did a live shot, just a kind of, we call them situationers, where you kind of, there's no script. You kind of just talk for a minute. So I did a situation where I had to. I think I posted. I don't know if you saw. I posted on Facebook. I did the dunk tank. So
yeah, I saw that.
Yes.
You didn't. You missed it.
No, I missed all three.
It's that throw.
Yeah,
I did see that.
I posted it and I was like, I don't know if people know I played baseball my whole life. Maybe I should not post this on Facebook. But
he had to run up and hit it with his hand. I was like,
yeah,
what
and
is
I
this?
was like, yeah. So like those are the fun stuff I get to do,
Of course.
But it's always. That's my one time when there's no script that I can just like have fun and do it. And that's like a big pusher as to why I love the job I do and why it's such a great profession to get into, because
it gives you that feeling where it's like a performance.
Yes.
And like, I want to ask you, like, when did you start to realize that you can like master the live shot? Because when I did it in class, I was horrible at it. They'd be like, okay, here's a story, Ryan. Come up with 30 seconds with your notepad, and you got to stand there and tell the story. But it's hard. Like, you can't look at your notes. Are you good at memorization, or like how do you find out where it was the moment where it was like, okay, like I can do this, I'm meant to do this?
I mean, I'm still learning. Trust me, there are some live shots where I still, I get off air and I'm just like, wow, that was really bad.
Yeah,
But that's
like
a learning thing.
It's a learning curve, and I think for me, I focus too much on like. So usually, again, these are all things that we write before we even leave the station. If I'm like out maybe at somewhere or whatever, and I'm doing live shots,
carnival.
Well, someone like a carnival, I'm going to probably just talk about whatever. A lot other times, like it's very specific details we need to tell people at home. So like
a robbery.
Yeah, a robbery or thing. I didn't do the story, but I literally saw a dead body going down a river the other day.
Well, that's not fun.
So yeah.
All right, yeah. But yeah, there's like details of that you obviously have to hit, so you would probably know prior, right?
Yeah, so I write the script, and I think for me, I get too stuck on like memorizing my lines. It's almost like a performance. So
I'm the same way. I got no word
I
for
sit
word.
there and I'll stand in front of the camera. We're 10 minutes out from show, and I'm like sitting there reading them over and over and over again. And then I get and actually like you throw it live, and you just have to do it. And half the time, I mean I don't botch it, but I sometimes will say differently, and then we go into my story. And I'm like, wow, I literally sat here for 10 minutes and memorized the lines, and I didn't even say it the way I did. Because for me, I do better when I don't think about it and I just do it. Sometimes I like overread my script sometimes. But the live presence of, trust me, in the beginning, I didn't really have a good one. I talked very fast. It's funny, people in the thing called my Jersey accent came out.
He yells at me all the time for talking fast. So you got to slow the fuck down, Ryan.
Our show is fast, right? and that's what it is. And it's all a learning thing. And, we've gotten better at being a little bit more organic about, like, we're showmen too. And that's what's fun about it, right? And you get to be creative. And I think even if I had that 30 seconds, it's like, that's what makes you shine. And that's what differentiates you from other people and allows you to like grow further. I think that's like your time in the sun,
And plus, like, you're in a place where it's like, oh, it's not the great situation. I mean, I'm just like hypothetically speaking. And it's like, oh, I'm not getting paid like a bag, but it's like people search for that feeling where it's like you get nervous. Like people search to be nervous. That's like part of the reason why I did stand up was like I missed like, oh, I gotta play this game. I'm nervous. Like I was missing that feeling for years. And I was like, if I go do stand up, it's like you live for that feeling. And every time you're on camera, you're getting that feeling.
I know. I think for me, when you talk about the performance aspect, I think the biggest thing for me was like going to a small market and not really knowing anything, moving up there on a whim. You don't really know what to expect.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any expectations. And I think just in terms of where I live and the people that I've met through work and through social life, and the places exceeded my expectations. And I mean, a lot of people usually, the way that our industry works is you work for 2 years at a station, and you jump ship and you go to your next market. And I stayed for a third year because I just didn't feel like I was ready yet. And
I was going to ask you, like, why did you choose to re-up your contract? Like, especially because I know you're such like a big sports guy. And like, you're not doing sports right now. That's got to be eating you alive. So is it more so just building up like your resume, building up your reel, so that potentially down the line, you know what, you could do sports every day?
I go back and forth. I think when I first started looking at jobs, I felt that it's harder to get into sports because there's so many people that want to do it, and the amount of jobs are just the job pool is a lot smaller than news.
Yeah, Paul can speak on that.
I work for two. Well, now I don't work. I stopped one, but I currently work for the New Jersey Devils. I do part-time work for them during the season. I actually do I'm going on my 4th year with them, and I love it there. Like, it's awesome. And then I worked last year with the Jets, and like, it just wasn't the vibe. It just wasn't the vibe for me. And I realized like how difficult it is working in the world of sports. And even like I was doing internships with the Jets. I had a friend of mine who got offered a full-time job with them, and how poor the job was. I was like, you're the New York Jets. Like, I just don't understand how you could pay someone so little, or like the work environment. I was like, you're still a professional sports team, especially in the New York market.
Yeah.
So to see that put a lot of perspective into my mind. And even with the Devils, like, I love them. I love the organization, but just trying to work up the ladder is extremely like impossible. And
It's like who you know. But I've also seen
yeah.
people who were like big NFL sports fans, and then they go into the sports world and work in the sports world, and then they go on to say like, oh, it's like almost ruined football for them, and just being involved in sports. It's like, why do you want to take away that love that you have watching the Phillies, and then you're there every day? And it's like, oh, I don't want to be here doing this work all the time. I'm not saying that's the case, but it's like sometimes it ruins it if you become working in that industry instead of taking away and being a fan.
Dude, that was me with movies. When I was in film school, I couldn't go to the movies and think normally watching a film because I was analyzing the hell out of it.
So it ruined the movie for you.
It like every time I went to the movie, I'm like, okay, cool. I was thinking about a million things. And then even when we were covering movies on the show a little bit, I would have to think about, we did like movie reviews. So then I'm watching the movie differently. So I think, like that kind of aspect. And that's why a lot of people are like, do something you love, but sometimes it can go a little far and then ruin that passion for you. But if you find a job that you do that and it doesn't ruin the passion for you, it just like pushes
enhances it.
It enhances it. And I was talking to someone a little older, and she was talking about how like our generation, the jobs that we're doing, we're really passion like driven, right? Like we want to go for our passions and we want to be fulfilled at work, where like older generations were just money. And that's the difference between us. And it like seems like what he's doing, what I'm trying to do, and what you're doing is so cool because it's no matter what the pay is, like there's an end goal for you, and you could see you can be working your way up.
I think so. And I think a lot of people now, especially kids in college, when you go back and talk to them or you bring in guest speakers, I had guest speakers, reporters who are now 3, 4, now 5, 6 years into their career. And they'll tell you straight up, like, look, you're not going to make a lot of money doing this job. Like, if you're coming into it thinking you're going to, like Ryan said, make a bag, it's not.
That's why I did not pursue it. Like, you're not going to make shit. I'm out. Dropping this class.
But at the end of the day, for me, I feel like there's always time in life to make money. And
yeah.
And for me, the happiness of me doing something that I love doing is more at a high pedestal for me than having, thousands and thousands of dollars in my bank account.
And it's only going to help you. Like what you're experiencing now, the one-man band going out shooting it,
yeah,
and the covering all the main events that are happening, like you're in charge of that. It's only going to help you down the road. So it's just like what Paul said. I agree with them, and where our generation really trusts the process, where like maybe older generations more so like hard labored work. How do I provide food? And
go be depressed and just like, and then when you come home, you can be happy. And we're like, no, we want to be happy all the time.
Yeah, right.
So what is your end goal? Do you have one? Like, what's your
Phillies.
dream job?
The Phillies.
Play-by-play.
So it's funny. I've gone back and forth, and I honestly think I'm going to stick with news. I've grown to. I always maybe felt like, okay, kind of like Ryan said, maybe I could use this, build the structure of becoming a journalist, and then use that to get a sports job. Yeah. But I think I really have grown to like news more than I think I was going to, and I think now, it's kind of its thing now. I haven't like posted it publicly yet, but I'm taking on a new job when I go back next week. I'm going to be the weekend anchor now.
Oh yeah. So put it on the ticker. Weekend anchor. Brendan Straub on the ticker. Flashing red lights.
So
we have breaking news on the show.
That's
pretty fire.
So
we have breaking news
I'm going to be
news anchor. Weekend news anchor.
So I'm going to be anchoring my own shows. I get to produce my own shows.
Let's go.
That's awesome.
I have to work Saturdays and Sundays, which is going to be a transition at first. I work noon to midnight Saturday and Sunday. So it's going to be a little bit of a transition.
Can you talk about that? Like you're going to be producing your own shows. What is that? Because I know you recently sat, I don't know if it was recently, because I was stalking way down your Facebook timeline, but you sat in on an anchor desk.
Correct.
How did that go? Where it was like, oh, I need to do this. And then talk about how you got your own show.
Yeah, so I've been filling in on the anchor desk here and there, especially in the summertime, people take vacation time. And so once you kind of get there for a while and then they have trust in you, they'll train you on how to be a producer, how to be an anchor. And then you kind of, once your time comes up, they're like, hey, this person's taking some time off. We need you to fill in some shows. So most of the shows I fill in on are the 10 and 11 o'clock at night shows. So my shift would end up being 4 p.m. to midnight. You go in at 4 and a lot of times you're doing minimal stuff. And once the 6 o'clock ends and you're kind of doing things, then, you're producing your own show. So what you see, like, you usually see, we call them subject bars. You see on the bottom, it tells you what story. I have to produce all of those. The stuff on the side of the screen, all the video, make sure it all works. That's me behind the scenes before my show even starts, before I even have to perform the show. and actually like do well for 35 minutes.
So it's just like testing everything.
Making sure everything works.
So it's like testing the show like a walkthrough before you get on.
Yeah, so like this is the rundown of the show. I have to build the show from scratch. And
that's dope though.
So I get the creativity in these smaller markets. When you get to bigger markets, you have your own producer. A lot of the anchors aren't writing. They might tweak based on how they talk. Words are different, but your producer is pretty much doing all that for you. So I'm learning how to do all of these jobs. It's only going to help me in the future. And so now it's kind of just the way of the business. Our current weekend anchor is leaving to go to a new job in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is a huge market jump for him. I'm super happy for him.
Dope.
So
shout out that guy.
His name is John.
No
shout out John Pearsos. Shout out.
John Pearsos. No free shout.
So John is leaving to go to Knoxville. So the position
Johnny
opened
Knoxville?
up.
For God's sake.
It's funny because we have made that joke a million times since he said he was leaving for Knoxville. So we talk about it, and I talk back and forth. And at first I was skeptical because I work Monday through Friday currently. So I was kind of like going back and forth. Like I have a nice social life right now, and like I get to enjoy my weekends. I work Monday nights, so I kind of get a long weekend every weekend too. So I went back and forth, and at first I was like, no, I don't want to do it. That's not me. Like, I don't want to be sitting in the station 24 hours on a weekend.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it, and I was thinking more of social life before career. And I kind of had my priorities in different places. So I realized that I need to really sit down and focus on my career and see, because ultimately, I think down the road, I want to be a full-time anchor. I think that's my calling. I've wanted to be an anchor since I was doing the news in high school. So reporting was always kind of like a stepping stone, but I also realized that I like reporting a lot more than I thought I would. So you kind of pick up on these things when you're doing this job because every day is different and you're picking up on new things. I mean, I'm learning new stuff every day.
But you can't pass that opportunity.
No,
up.
I feel it's so rare. I feel like I've talked to a lot of people where like they're stuck in the reporting gig. It's like, oh, I've always wanted to be an anchor, and then you're stuck in the reporting and it's just never available. So for you, I feel still at such a young age, if you get the at least shot to be able to feel what it's like to be in that spot and at least learn it and get a vibe for it, and then you can make a decision later down the line, like that's so valuable.
Yeah,
because you're about to say that, because I was like, he should do like some like entrepreneur shit, and because like, are there news? Like, I know there's gossip, like TikTok feed, Instagram reels.
Ones, yeah.
I was like, maybe just like on the side, but now he's got his own fucking show on cable TV.
He's got TV.
So I'll be doing 4 shows a weekend. So we don't do any morning shows. Again, we're a smaller crew. Again, when you go to these smaller markets, those crews are smaller than what you'll see in like a Philly or New York City. So I produce in my own show. We do a 6 o'clock show and an 11 o'clock show, and I'll do that Saturday and Sunday, and then I'll do reporting on Monday and Tuesday. So I only work 4 days a week now because it's two 12 hours and 2 8 hours, so it's 40 hours. And then I'm off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
But working holidays, how's that been? Tough?
It's funny because at first it was tough because I'm also really far from home. I live, it's a 6-hour drive home. So I don't get to get home. I mean, I'm home now as, I grew up, around these guys. Yeah. And we all went to the same schools. So I don't get to come back home as much as I wish I would. I only get to probably come home 4 or 5 times a year if I'm lucky, for usually 3 or 4 days at a time. So these longer breaks I'm taking, I've been home for almost 5 now. I have another 5, I go back next Monday. So this is like I usually take one big vacation every summer, where I come home and I see all my family and stuff. And it's like the one time I get to like enjoy myself. But holidays, you kind of realize that it really is just a day. It's
a lot of other people work on holidays, and there's NBA games, there's NFL games, and then you think of all the other people that go involved with those games, like camera guys,
there's a lot
anchors,
of people, yeah,
work in the stadiums or concessions. There's like, I realize I work on holidays. Like I'll designate a couple hours to work. So yeah, I feel you.
And like for example, like they feed us on Thanksgiving. We get Thanksgiving food catered to us at work. So they look out for you. They know that we don't want to be there, but yet we have a job to do, and it's the job that we chose to do. So at the end of the day, that's what we have to do. So again, like I said, our station is open 364 days a year. The only day we do not do any news is Christmas. Christmas is the only day a year that we're closed. So I've worked, last 3 years I've worked Thanksgivings, I've worked Christmas Eves, I've worked New Year's Day, New Year's Eve. You've pretty much named it holiday. I work it. I mean, we
Las
also
Esperanza. I mean, that's a place.
That's a place.
What the hell? Cinco de Mayo. That's where I go for Cinco de Mayo. That's why I said it.
The Guinness has been getting to you. We finally finished.
I'm pretty smacked up. I'm not gonna lie. So I was gonna wonder, like, was there any like eye-opening story or something you saw? I mean, you lightly went across that you saw a dead body floating down the river. I mean, I feel like I need to know a little bit more about what was going on there.
So I guess like long story short, there was a guy who was missing. He was an older guy. They were looking for him. Police sent out something, so we put it on our airwaves. I think he was an older guy. Maybe he had some mental problems. He didn't really have his medicine for a few days, so they actually like saw him in Buffalo. Like his plates were, I guess, images with what they can do with technology these days. Was in Buffalo. That's like 2 hours from us. So like all over like our area, we're trying to find this guy, help it to find him, and then it ends up being him. And weird story. So I'm not even working at the time. We have a group chat with some guys that I've met. We play basketball at the one park by our house. So I was waiting for them to come by, and all of a sudden, like I look over and there's this like random girl like hopping the fence like towards the river. I'm like, what is she like doing? Like what is going on? So like, news reporter, curious. I'm like, oh, what's going on over there? So I walk over and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, there's like, and then I look down and there's like a bridge right there. It's called the Van Duzy Street Bridge. And there's a bridge and there's a bunch of firefighters and like lights and stuff. And I'm like, when did I see all this? And then I look down and there's the guy. Unfortunately,
so you do call your news station? So, it's like, hey, we have a story out here.
So we were already on it. Our Nightside reporter was already on it. And I called the station. I said, hey, just to let you know, I did see the body. It's floating down the river towards this point. I did hear like because it's funny. I have such like so I call it scanner ear.
Yeah.
So the police scanners, we have a police scanner running at our station 24/7, no matter what time of day.
Well, you're like a detective almost.
So yeah, so if something happens on the scanner, you hear accident on the road or possible, you hear keywords, entrapment. That means someone will be entrapped in their car. That's injuries. That's airbag deployment. MVA, motor vehicle accident, things you pick up on the scanner when your scanner ear. They're like, oh, so they were already on it, and like there was a reporter, but I called the station, and be like, hey, I honestly forgot who was working that night. I was like, hey, I don't know who's working, but I just saw the body. I'm pretty sure they're gonna put boats down, like at this point, down by the docks to like wait for the current to slow down because the river's it's called the Black River. It's pretty fast, and so they were trying to figure out a way to get the body out of the water, but they just couldn't. The river was too fast. They didn't want to put somebody else in there, and God forbid, more harm. So they waited, they put some boats down, they got the body and brought it out. But I mean, that was just one crazy. I think the craziest experience I had on the road was I did a story, or at least I tried to until shit went crazy. Yeah.
No cursing on this.
Shit hit the fan.
Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Okay. I told myself I wasn't gonna try and curse, but sorry, Dad.
That's life.
You could blame it on me.
But I went to this house. This kid, their like son was in like a weird situation. He's kind of like homeless, kind of on drugs, been in and out of jail. And he like burnt down their garage and like it was like torched, like their car was gone and like all this stuff. So station's like, okay, like we need you to go to the house, go get pictures of the shed and the garage, like take pictures of it, and then knock on the door and see if the family has anything to say about what happened. So I'm like, okay. And I think that's the craziest part. People don't realize that when you watch TV, you see these shootings and stuff. We're talking to people within minutes or days of a loved one passing.
Yeah,
or
it's tough, dude.
I mean, I've done stories. I mean, you see them, people literally get burned alive, and you have like memorials, and you're trying to talk to these people, and you sometimes feel like you're like intruding on their personal time, but at the end of the day, I have a job to do, and that's what I'm being sent there to do. So I knock on the door, and the lady's like, "Hey," I was like, "Hey, I'm Brendan Straub from Channel 7. I understand what happened here. Would you want to, tell your piece of what happened?" And she's like, "No, I don't really want to say anything." I'm like, "Okay, whatever, happens sometimes." So then I go back outside and I'm waiting for the police to call me back so I can get the police report and like figure out what to do with the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like she comes outside and she starts screaming at me, cursing me out, get off my property. First of all, I wasn't on her property. So there's rules in journalism. If you are on the sidewalk or in the street that is public property, I can shoot anything from the sidewalk anywhere.
Public property, man.
No, seriously. And I was trying to justify that. She's probably about maybe 30, 40 yards away in the front of her house. And so I'm just getting shots of I'm doing my job. Like, I'm not going to let things. So then she goes back inside. 5 minutes later, this other guy comes out and he goes towards the car. He's walking towards this car and he says, and I will never forget it, probably like a career thing I always say, "If you and your camera are in that effing street when I go there, I'm running you over." Okay. So he gets in his car, comes around the corner, and I'm like, okay, I don't have the time or the energy to be dealing with this. So I get into my news. We have like news vehicles or like, I have all our station letters on it. I get in the news vehicle. He follows me down the street all the way until I got back to the main road and I made a right, and then he turned around and came back. So like, I guess I wouldn't like go back. And then I called the station, told them what happened. They're like, "No, we don't want you to go." I mean, and that's like, those are the calls you have to make sometimes. Like, we don't want you to go back there, God forbid. We don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
you
got to make sure you're safe.
So I almost got run over by a car. That was one instance.
That is a crazy moment.
But then there's other days where I did a story. One of my favorite stories I ever told. There was this woman I did a story with a few months ago prior to this story. And she was in a bad car. She was riding her bike, bike accident. And I happened to be friends with her on Facebook because we were friends. Now, I think I had to be friends with her because she was going to share me pictures for the other story. And so we just stayed friends on Facebook. So the accident happens and she posted on her page. She has cancer, or I think she still has cancer. And she was riding for this thing she does every year for ALS. And so because she got hit, she was out of commission. She couldn't finish her miles for her ride. Well, her next door neighbor found out and he finished the ride for her and did all the extra miles. So I did a story. We sat down in her living room and we kind of like talked to her as she's sitting there, like, out of commission. She has bumps and bruises and scars and, and kind of like this whole idea of, neighbors helping neighbors. And I got to tell the story of, interview her neighbor, get him like, doing the practice drives up and down the street on the bike. And those are like the great stories. And like at the end of the day, once you see it, and those stories, like once you see them air and you watch it live, and then you just are like, wow, I really did something great today. And I think that's the part of the job that I really love, is that you can go back and yes, I only get about a minute and a half, sometimes less of screen time a day. But if I make that happen and it works, then I feel like I did my job.
You said something very beautiful. I had a ma'am, can you just get on that? Can you think you can get on that bike and just see if we can get a little shot right here?
Oh no, it was her neighbor on the bike. She couldn't ride the bike
maybe
anymore.
she was able to get back on.
No, her bike was her bike. She actually brought out her bike. It was literally like the frame was literally like almost in half.
No, do you have another bike so we get some B-roll of some shots?
No, but that's really awesome. And I think
awesome.
That's the whole idea. Like, what keeps you going the next day? And what makes you want to continue with that job. So
that's gotta be tough though, like those stories. And like, there's probably some times where you're like, man, like, I don't know if I can do this, like covering this negativity, not negativity, but being and seeing these things.
But then you see the positivity, right?
Like,
you get to see both sides of the story. And that's what's like good about it.
And then there's reporters that go out during like ride. Like, people don't realize that like journalists are like sacrificing their lives to be out there to give a story. And we appreciate you, Brendan.
Thanks.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a great show. We can definitely wrap it up there. Did you drink at all?
I did.
Were you okay? Well, I was salty too. He had a lot of drinks here. I think he was ready to get hammered like us. I mean, that's just part of the show.
Yeah, it's life's a party.
Life's always a party. But Brandon, we appreciate you being on the show.
Where can they find you? I mean, you put some B-roll. I mean, not B-roll. You put some reels out there on Facebook.
Yeah, I guess Facebook. It's Brendan. If you look up Brendan Straub 7 News, I have a professional page. I don't really use it enough. I think once I start anchoring, I'm gonna start showcasing some of the stuff that I do behind the scenes.
Your website? Or not a website.
I don't have a website, but if you type my name into Google, all my stuff pops up.
Oh, he's a Google guy. You could wow, that's some.
And he's got his own goddamn weekend show starting with the new contract. So congratulations on that. We appreciate you having you, Brendan.
Thank you guys for having me.
That'll do it for us. As always,
music. Take us out.
Peace.
Later. I'm allergic.
Allergic to what? Being a bitch?
Oh, okay. That's not called for.